You're about to witness one of medieval Europe's most calculated acts of institutional destruction. For 76 days in the autumn of 1307, they didn't just interrogate the Knights Templar. They systematically dismantled one of the most powerful military orders in Christendom, piece by piece. And it all started with a single dawn raid. Forget everything you think you know about medieval justice. The confessions that followed weren't simply extracted through torture. What came before was something far more complex, a convergence of debt, politics, and religious authority that still shapes how we understand the relationship between church and state today. This is the story of October 13, 1307, and I am going to show you exactly what happened when a king decided to destroy an order of warrior monks. It's Friday, October 13, 1307, just before dawn. Across France, royal officers are breaking seals on identical letters they received the day before. The orders are clear, precise, and absolute. At first light, they are to arrest every member of the Knights Templar in France simultaneously. No exceptions, no delays, no mercy. In Paris, officers surround the Templar headquarters, a fortress that has stood as a symbol of Christian military might for nearly 2 centuries. Inside, around 140 knights are sleeping, completely unaware that their world is about to end. The Templars weren't criminals. They weren't heretics plotting in shadows. They were an elite military and financial institution that had spent 200 years protecting Christian pilgrims in the Holy Land and managing one of medieval Europe's most sophisticated banking networks. To understand what happened on that October morning, you need to understand who the Templars actually were, because the order that King Philip IV of France destroyed in 1307 was nothing like the legends that would grow around them. The poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, the Knights Templar, were founded around 1119 in Jerusalem. Their original mission was straightforward: protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land during the Crusades. 9 knights took monastic vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and dedicated themselves to this dangerous work. But within decades, the Templars transformed into something unprecedented. In 1129, the Catholic Church officially recognized them at the Council of Trent. Pope Innocent II granted them extraordinary privileges. They answered to no one except the Pope himself. They were exempt from local laws, didn't pay taxes, and could cross borders freely. This independence allowed them to build a vast network of fortifications, farms, and financial centers across Europe and the Middle East. By the late 13th century, the Templars had become Europe's first international bankers. Kings, nobles, and merchants deposited wealth with them. They issued letters of credit, managed estates, and financed royal projects. They weren't hoarding treasure in secret vaults. They were operating what we'd recognize today as an international financial institution, complete with encrypted accounting methods and secure transfer systems. But their military purpose was fading. By 1291, when the last Crusader stronghold of Acre fell to Muslim forces, the Templars had lost their primary mission. They retreated to Cyprus, maintaining their military structure but increasingly focused on their financial operations. This is where King Philip IV enters the story, and his motives were anything but spiritual. Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, inherited a kingdom drowning in debt. He'd fought expensive wars against England and Flanders. He'd debased the currency, taxed the clergy, and expelled the Jews from France, seizing their property. Nothing was enough. The Templars, by contrast, were wealthy and independent. Their Paris headquarters served as the French royal treasury. Philip himself had taken refuge there during a riot in 1306. He knew exactly how much wealth they controlled, and he knew they answered to Rome, not to him. Historical records show Philip's financial desperation. He owed the Templars massive sums borrowed to finance his wars. Modern scholars, including Malcolm Barber and Helen Nicholson, argue that Philip's attack on the Templars was primarily motivated by debt and the desire to seize their assets. But Philip needed a pretext. He couldn't simply confiscate church property without justification, so he manufactured one. Beginning around 1305, rumors began circulating about the Templars: whispers of secret rituals, denials of Christ, obscene ceremonies during initiation rites. Where these rumors originated remains debated, but they found a receptive audience in Philip's court. In 1307, Philip presented these accusations to Pope Clement V, a Frenchman who owed his position partly to Philip's support. The charges were shocking. The Templars allegedly spat on the cross, worshipped an idol called Baphomet, engaged in homosexual acts, and practiced heresy. Pope Clement was skeptical. He'd known Templar leadership personally and found the accusations hard to believe, but Philip didn't wait for papal approval. On September 14, 1307, Philip's officers prepared sealed orders to be delivered across France. The letters contained detailed arrest instructions and a list of charges. On October 12, officials opened these letters and prepared to execute the largest coordinated arrest in medieval history. At dawn on Friday the 13th, officers moved simultaneously across France. In Paris, royal guards surrounded the Templar headquarters. In every city, town, and rural commandery where Templars lived, soldiers appeared at the doors. The Templars were utterly unprepared. Despite their military training, despite their reputation as warrior monks, they offered no resistance. Why would they? They had committed no crime. They trusted in their papal protection and their reputation. Within hours, approximately 2,000 Templars were in custody across France. Their property was seized, their records confiscated, their lives as they knew them over, and then came the interrogations. The arrests were only the beginning. What Philip needed now was something that would justify his actions to Europe and to the Pope. He needed confessions. The interrogations began immediately. Royal inquisitors, working alongside church officials appointed by compliant bishops, set to work on the imprisoned Templars. And the methods they used would become a defining example of medieval judicial torture. Let me be precise about what we know from the historical record. The primary source for the Templar interrogations is a collection of documents called the Papal Inquiry Records, preserved in Vatican and French archives. These documents record the testimonies, the questions asked, and sometimes the conditions under which confessions were obtained. 36 Templars died during the first round of interrogations in Paris alone. The cause of death is documented: torture. Medieval French law, under certain circumstances, permitted judicial torture to extract confessions from those accused of serious crimes. The methods included the strappado, where the victim's hands were tied behind their back and they were suspended by a rope, dislocating shoulders. There was the application of fire to the feet, sometimes with grease applied first to intensify the burning. Sleep deprivation, starvation, and psychological pressure were standard. Within days, confessions began. Grand Master Jacques de Maille, the highest-ranking Templar, confessed to spitting on the cross during his initiation 42 years earlier. Other knights admitted to similar acts. The confessions spread rapidly. But here's what makes this moment historically significant. These weren't confessions extracted from ignorant peasants. These were educated men, knights from noble families, monks who'd taken religious vows. They understood the implications of what they were saying. So why did they confess? Modern scholars point to several factors. First, the physical reality of torture. Medical historians note that the methods used cause excruciating pain and often permanent injury. Resistance has limits. Second, the psychological dimension. The Templars had been arrested by a Christian king, interrogated by church officials, and accused of crimes against Christ himself. Their entire identity was built on religious devotion and obedience to authority. When that authority turned against them, their worldview collapsed. Third, they were isolated, cut off from each other, from legal counsel, from any support system. Each man believed he was alone, that others had already confessed, that resistance was futile. By November 1307, Philip had enough confessions to present his case publicly. He called an assembly of the Estates General, France's representative body, and laid out the charges and confessions. The assembly, composed largely of men who depended on royal favor, supported Philip's actions. Pope Clement V was horrified. He hadn't authorized these arrests or interrogations. Philip had acted unilaterally, violating papal authority. In November, Clement suspended the inquisitors and demanded that all Templars be handed over to church custody. Philip ignored him. He continued the interrogations, expanded the arrests to Templar properties outside France, and pressured other European monarchs to follow his lead. In England, King Edward II reluctantly arrested the Templars but found little evidence of wrongdoing. In Spain and Portugal, investigations yielded few convictions. In Germany, church councils examined Templars and found them innocent. The persecution was primarily a French affair, driven by French royal interests. But Clement was in an impossible position. He was residing in France, dependent on Philip's protection, and facing a king who'd already demonstrated his willingness to defy papal authority. Philip had previously attacked Pope Boniface VIII, sending soldiers to assault him physically in 1303. In 1308, Clement formally ordered investigations throughout Christendom, but he also allowed the French proceedings to continue. The interrogations dragged on for years. In March 1310, something extraordinary happened. As a papal commission met in Paris to investigate the Templar affair, approximately 600 Templars who'd confessed under torture now publicly recanted their confessions. They declared their innocence, explained they'd confessed only under extreme duress, and demanded to defend their order. This was incredibly brave. Recanting a confession in a heresy case meant certain death under medieval law. But these men had found their courage again. Philip's response was swift and brutal. On May 12, 1310, he ordered 54 Templars burned at stake as relapsed heretics. They were executed outside Paris, and according to witnesses, they went to their deaths proclaiming their innocence and the innocence of the order. The message was clear: confess and cooperate, or die. The remaining Templars fell silent. In 1312, Pope Clement officially dissolved the Knights Templar at the Council of Vienna. He didn't declare them guilty, he said. The order's reputation was too damaged to continue. Their property was transferred to another military order, the Knights Hospitaller, though in France, Philip managed to retain much of it. In March 1314, Jacques de Maille, the Grand Master, was brought to Paris for his final sentencing. He'd confessed under torture 7 years earlier. Now, standing before a public audience, he did something unexpected. He recanted his confession. He declared the Templars innocent, blamed Philip and compliant church officials for their destruction, and accepted whatever punishment would follow. The response was immediate. Philip ordered him burned at stake that same day. On March 18, 1314, Jacques de Molay was executed on an island in the Seine River. Contemporary accounts record that he asked to face Notre Dame Cathedral and maintained his innocence as the flames consumed him. Legend says he cursed Philip and Clement from the flames, predicting they'd join him before God's judgment within a year. Philip died in November 1314 from a hunting accident. Clement died in April 1314 from illness. The timing fueled centuries of speculation about Templar curses and supernatural vengeance, but the historical reality is more sobering. The destruction of the Templars wasn't about divine justice or mystical powers. It was about institutional power, financial desperation, and the vulnerability of any organization, no matter how powerful, when church and state unite against it. Modern scholarship, particularly work by Malcolm Barber and Barbara Froehlich, who examined Vatican archives released in 2007, reveals that Pope Clement privately absolved the Templar leadership of heresy charges in 1308. The so-called Chinon parchment shows Clement believed the Templars were guilty at most of inappropriate initiation rituals, not the horrific crimes Philip alleged. But Clement lacked the power to save them. Political reality outweighed truth. The Templar trials established legal precedents that would echo for centuries. They demonstrated how torture could be systematically used to destroy an institution. They showed how financial and political motives could be disguised as religious duty. And they left questions that scholars still debate today. Were the initiation rituals that some Templars described under torture real, or were they entirely fabricated? If real, what did they mean? Were they tests of obedience, remnants of earlier traditions, or something else? We'll never know with certainty. What we do know is that 76 days after that October dawn in 1307, the Knights Templar were broken, not by enemy armies in the Holy Land, but by a king's ambition and the tools of their own justice system turned against them.